No one has said welcome to Baylor yet to you. Welcome to Baylor. I'm Tommy Kidd. I'm the Associate Director of Baylor's Institute for Studies of Religion, and I also teach in the History Department here at Baylor. And it's my honor to introduce my new colleague, George Yancey. We just recruited George from the University of North Texas, and he teaches for us in the Department of Sociology and also is one of the core faculty at the Institute for Studies of Religion. Dr. Yancey received his PhD in sociology from UT Austin in 1995, and he comes to us from the University of North Texas in Denton, where he was also professor of sociology. And he began his career examining issues more directed towards race and ethnicity, but his more recent work has concerned the presence of anti-Christian bias in the United States. And Dr. Yancey is the author or co-author of numerous articles and books on racial issues and anti-Christian bias, including Transcending Racial Barriers Toward a Mutual Obligations Approach, 2010, which he co-authored with Michael Emerson. Hostile Environment, Understanding and Responding to Anti-Christian Bias, 2015. And Compromising Scholarship, Religious and Political Bias in American Higher Education, 2017. And he is active in his local church and works with a network of multiracial congregations in an effort to support Christian work on issues of racial reconciliation and multiracial ministry. And his talk today, as you can see, is Neither Jew nor Gentile, Achieving Diversity in a Christian Educational Context. Dr. Yancey.
Thanks for having me here. This is based on a book that I wrote a few years ago, and I'll just give you a little bit of background how I got to that book, because I've been studying multiracial churches. And when you say multiracial churches, every now and then as a professor, you get an opportunity to actually make extra money. Because you get people who hire you say, hey, we want to become more diverse. And so I was like, hey, all right, you're going to pay me, I'll go and I'll advise you. And one of the churches told me, one of the things I recommend one of the churches is you got to become more diverse in your leadership. And one of the churches told me, well, the problem is that we hire all of our ministers from the denominational school, and they're not diverse. So how can we overcome that? And I didn't have an easy answer for them, but of course what I had was a fantastic research question, which is, what is it about diversity on a Christian college setting? And so this is geared towards that question, diversity on a Christian college setting, educational setting. All right. What do we know about diversity at Christian colleges? Well, let's just look at different types of diversity. First, we know there's a higher ratio of women to men on Christian college campuses as opposed to other campuses. Now, the dirty little secret is on all campuses there's more women than men. That's what I'm telling my boys right now. I want them to go to college, so I'm saying, hey, of course, Moses is 4, so he doesn't care yet. But when he starts caring, I'm telling him, the women are at the college campus, go there, especially Christian college campuses. I think, if I remember correctly, I think I wrote it down, I think at Baylor, it's 58% women. Wait, let me double check that. I don't want to lead you all astray. 58.7%. So we know that, so if we're looking at diversity as far as sex, in some ways, Christian college campuses are more diverse if we're looking at women as the minority group. What I'm going to talk about today, there's a lower ratio of people of color to whites at Christian college campuses. Now this is it in general, just in general, we know this is to be the case. The difference is, I think, about 8% or so. Baylor is 64% white. If you look at UT Austin, that's 44% white. If you look at Rice, Rice big, 37% white. Baylor is around where Tech is, Texas Tech, 60% white. And the reason why that is black people don't want to go to Lubbock. It's Lubbock. So they stay pretty white, But there is a lack of diversity, relatively speaking, at Christian college campuses when it comes to racial issues. That should have been political diversity. I messed up on that one. There actually is more political diversity on Christian college campuses than there are on non-Christian college campuses, on secular campuses. And I just had a book recently come out last year on that very topic. And so, that's not going to be my topic today, but everyone wants to talk to me about that. And so really when it comes to diversity, the one major area, and this isn't, this is not, doesn't cover all ways we can measure diversity, but the one major area where Christian college campuses lack is racial diversity. I mean, you can argue that, yeah, there's more women, but if we're looking at majority-minority relations, is that so bad? There's more political diversity, but there's less racial diversity. So my question when I wanted to really look at this issue is, what works? And I'm going to get to that because I was less concerned on fulfilling some sort of political goal or ideological goal. I cared about what works and what doesn't work. And I'll describe my methods, and you can judge whether or not I hopefully get at that. All right, what do we know? Much of the literature has illustrated the value of educational racial diversity. There's literature that talks about how this diversity not only helps people of color, but helps white students. That it creates a better atmosphere for learning, you get different ideas, you get more stimuli, that all of these being equal, that diverse settings are better educationally than non-diverse settings. So that by itself should motivate us to want more diversity. There's a lot of empirical work on individual level predictors, on who attends and graduates from college. So, and I'll touch on some of that pretty soon here. But there's little empirical work, and I'm surprised by this, on institutional predictors in general, and none on predictors of students of colors. So we know individually what happens, but we don't know institutionally what draws people here. So there's all these predictors on the individual level, but not on the institutional level. So some of you all probably have heard of Tino's theory of retention, just looking at retention just in general. And there's two parts of it. The first part is the commitment to the goal of degree completion. In other words, students will stay and be retained if they're committed to staying and retaining. And one of the things that I discovered having worked in graduate programs, this is true in graduate programs, I'm sure it's true in undergraduate programs, is the students who graduate are not always the smartest ones. The ones who are the most persistent. So persistent, I'm not saying intelligence doesn't matter, but persistence actually matters more. In my experience, I can't put my finger on your research, but in my experience, persistence matters more. And I've seen that at the undergraduate level to a certain degree as well. And also, integration into the education institution. I think this is a key one when we're looking at people of color. I don't think there's a difference in persistence, but I do think there's a difference in integration. Do you feel like you're a part of that campus? And if you do, you're more likely to be retained and to get your degree. So this is a theory of retention, because it's not just about do you attract, and I'm going to touch on this, but also are people graduating? Are they getting through the program? Because what good is it to bring a bunch of people of color here and then they just flunk out? That doesn't do any good. All right. So what I did was first I just looked at just some data initially before I did any research, just to see, all right, institutionally what matters. Now, here are a couple predictors that were pretty clear when I looked at the data. And this is not surprising, that your city diversity is going to be a factor in the diversity of your university. So, if your college is in North Dakota, you're only going to be so diverse. If your college in North Dakota and you're 85% white, you probably should be cheering. Because, now your college in Hawaii is 85% white, you probably should be crying. The diversity of the city and the area is incredibly important. And one of the reasons why Christian college campuses are less diverse is if you look at where a lot of them are located, they're located in small rural towns in mostly white sections of the country. Now, I guess one advice is, all right, you move your college to the big city. Of course, there's only so much you can do there, but you just have to recognize that. But also, so you can't do much about city diversity unless you're going to really move. But also diversity of faculty. And I'll go into why this is important. Diversity of faculty was a key predictor of diversity. So looking at the data, looking at how diverse the faculty is, and then how diverse the student body is, consistently diversity of faculty. Now, is it that you get diverse faculty and students come, or do students come and get diverse faculty? That's hard to tease out, but I'm gonna make an argument that at least part of it is having the presence of diverse faculty is going to create more diversity. I'm not going to, I can't make the argument that that's the only thing. It could be that in some cases that you get a diverse population and you didn't hire diverse faculty. I'm not dismissing that. But at least part of why that is there is because of the students are there, because of the diverse faculty. When I looked at some of the institutional factors and graduation rates, what was interesting is that the graduation rate of the majority group was a key indicator of the graduation rate of the students of color. That if the college had an atmosphere where students tend to graduate in higher numbers for whites, they also tend to graduate in higher numbers for people of color. Doesn't mean that their graduation rates was equal, but there was a correlation there, which indicates that whatever creates higher graduation rates is going to affect both. And in fact, in a little bit, I'll talk to you about different types of students of color, and you can see why this is going to be a factor as well. So that is part of, just looking at the data, just, eyeballing some of the data that I had got access to that before I could start collecting any data, just look at these institutional factors. All right. So I decided to conduct some research. What I did was I sent a survey to 406 Protestant campuses, and 161 were returned. 88 of them were conservative Protestant campuses. 73 of them were mainline Protestant campuses. So I sent to both. I considered Catholic colleges for a while. I decided that this was enough work for me. But part of me wishes I had, because they were giving me more knowledge on what was occurring. I wasn't leaving out Catholics because I have anything against Catholics. It's just that that was enough work for me to do just this. I also sent open-ended questionnaires to students at 6 Protestant campuses. So I had contacts at mainline and conservative Protestant campuses, professors, and I hit them up and say, hey, we'll get some students to fill out these surveys, and I sent the link, and I got 475. They're open-ended questions, which allows me, it's not as great as doing an interview where you can probe, but you can still get some qualitative answers. Now, you're going to see some of them, and you can still get some insight. And the advantage of doing open-ended questionnaires, what you miss is the interviews is, the follow-up question. But what you get is the numbers. And this is not, a quantitative work where you can say, okay, I can extrapolate this. But with the numbers, you start to see patterns more easily. And so what I'm going to discuss are some of these patterns that we begin to see from these open-ended questionnaires. So this allows me to, I survey the campuses themselves, so I get the dynamics of what's happening there. And then I talk to students about what those dynamics mean to them. And thus, I can not only make a sort of correlation between, all right, this is here and this is successful, but now talking to the students, I can get some ideas why it's successful, so that we might be able to know how to replicate it. The student breakdown, by the way, was, it was overwhelmingly white. Not surprised, because these are Protestant campuses. But I also had 45 blacks, 31 Hispanics, 25 Asians, 20 multiracial, and 10 others. And that was enough that I could start seeing some patterns with students of color as well. Would I like more? Yes, but that was enough, I feel like. All right. First, just to get an idea of some of the general atmosphere problems that sort of arise. Now, remember, these are answers from questionnaires that are sent to me as a professor, and right now I'm going to look at some of the responses of white students, and then we'll see how some of the students of color respond to some of these atmosphere issues. This is by conservative and mainline. It's going to be whether it's a conservative campus or not. I didn't ask them about their political orientation, okay? So that's what I mean by conservative. White junior male. Being something about means I believe people should stay in their own race when it comes to relationships and other parts of family life. Now, this is something that they're replying to on a survey. The person chose the school because of the non-diversity aspect of the school. I went to public school, which was also non-diverse, and I did not want such a shocking college. Now, let me be clear. This is not the vast majority of the students, but I'm saying, that this was not totally rare either. It's not talked about, but generally racial jokes are made all the time. There's at least more racism here than public school life. In Illinois, a common saying is, I don't mind the black people, but I hate, and you can finish that one out. So this is the atmosphere from some students. And once again, I want to make clear, I'm not saying this is the majority of the students, it's not. But it's enough. I mean, I read enough of these to go, okay, students of color are running into these students. It's not every student, it's not most students, but they're running into this. All right, and was there another one? Okay, so students of color, their reaction. The stigma behind our skin color is of a dumb Mexican who will settle for less and work for minimum wage. I encountered a couple of people with that stigma and generalized towards us at my school. And you can see how they're encountering that because of what we just read. So this is, because there's still a Hispanic sophomore male. The reaction I get from most whites, they seem to be scared of me, but when they get to know me, they're okay with me. So this person has to overcome this, okay? It's a he does overcome it, but the initial reaction is they're scared of me. We went to the poor area with all white people, and they would say comments about the minorities, and I'm one of them. In some ways, as a Christian at a public school, I kind of know how that feels because you're in a setting there talking about those Bible thumpers. And I'm like, hey, it's kind of me. But this is even, this is a Hispanic, so maybe she didn't look as Hispanic, but they're making these comments, and she's one of them. So part of what's happening on these college campuses is you have this sort of tension that's there. It'll blow up at times. I suspect you also see this at secular schools as well, and whether it's more or less, I can't say, but at secular schools you have more diversity, and so people are probably adjusted to it a little bit more so. The white students there probably are just a little bit more so than here. Okay, so, all right. Like I said, I care about what works and what doesn't work. So I don't care about sacrificing sacred cows. On the questionnaire, I asked them, do you have these programs? And then I asked the students, how do you feel about these programs? And then I looked at whether or not these programs were correlated to diversity and retention. So if the program wasn't correlated to that, if there were students didn't like the program, or as we're going to see, didn't know about the programs, I have to say it's not working. Maybe it can be made to work, but it's not working. What didn't work? Preaching from chapel. Because I asked them, did you preach from chapel on racial issues? And some of the school says yes, and then I checked back, and it did not seem to help with retention or with recruitment. It was not correlated with that. Multicultural programs. Multicultural programs, introducing different cultures and, is not correlated. Now, there may be reasons to have it beyond that, but it's not correlated with retention. It's not correlated with recruitment. Anti-racism programs. Simply is not correlated with success in these ways. And I'm going to go into why I think that this is not working. And then non-European cultural programs, this is more like going into communities and doing things of that nature. Once again, not correlated. These programs did not work. And I have my own theory, which I'm going to go into as to why they didn't work and why what works does work. But first, why not? So let's go to some of our students. This is, History Month, celebrate History Month, sort of like a multicultural program. This mainline white senior female says, this leads to the separating of the races and tends to prevent intermixing. In other words, there's a certain resentment that comes out of this. And this first, I think they're talking about a multicultural program. So far, they've only raised more attention, or maybe an anti-racism program. It's one of those programs. They present so many more problems for us, blame us whites for them, and then leave us with no solution or no way to make things right. It's frustrating. Okay, I believe that multicultural programs, worsen the racial atmosphere as they tend to point out divisions among people. So here's what the white students are saying about these programs. Now, what are students of color saying? Okay. I think, of course, it informs students of why they have celebrations, but at times they feel like they fear having contact with us even more because they may think that we are demonstrating anger and hatred. But all we really are doing is showing that we're thankful for who we are and we want others to understand where we come from. So this person, she likes the program, but she's also seeing the reaction to her white friends. And she's seeing that they're resenting us from it. I think it's a great opportunity for people to come. However, it seems that we're only preaching to our own choir. So what this person is noticing is that when people do come to these programs, that they want to be there. The people that this person thinks needs to be there is not there. Maybe worsen, because people are ignorant to what it really stands for and think there's a place to hate white people. I think this person talking about anti-racism program. So the students of color are noticing the reaction of white students, and they're picking up that this is not, working. And here's another reason why these programs are not working. This is a little chart, and I think the words are too small, so I apologize for this. I asked the students in the survey, are you aware of the programs? And I also checked to make sure the college had these programs, okay? So when it came to multicultural student organization, 20% of the white students were not aware of that, which isn't that bad, I guess, I mean, we've had classes, 20% of students aren't aware of something, that's okay. Anti-racism programs, 3/4 didn't know anything about it. Multicultural programs, 35%. Community programs, about half. And non-European cultural programs, 78%. And then history programs, a lot of people are aware of that. So one thing that's happening is students don't know these programs even exist. So they're not working for that reason. Oops. So that's the bad news. I just told you what not to do. Now you're going, what do we do? All right. So what does work? About work, once again, by work is not by my personal preference. Is there a correlation between this and student retention, this and student recruitment, and what are the students saying about it? Okay, that's how I'm looking at it. So I'm not looking at this, this is what I want. All right, Professor Cole. See, I had to say it first because you're thinking, okay, yeah, you're just building yourself up. Yeah. Research. All right, professors of color. Diversity courses. Now, some of you say, well, why that work and not multicultural courses? I'm going to go into why I think it is too. And multicultural student groups, when they're voluntary, when they're not mandated, when they're voluntary, those appear to be much more successful. Okay, why? So let's look at what's happening here. Why? First, more awareness. All right, this person's talking about the multicultural programs. It's a mainline college of white male student. They may be more aware of who these people of other cultures really are, which makes dehumanization and racism less possible. So there's not resentment there. By the way, there's really not that much resentment from the answers when it came to multicultural program, to diversity courses. Now, that may have been a self-selection effect. Maybe the people who chose those courses wanted to be there. But some of these colleges require them too. So I think it's saying something. I think they've improved the racial atmosphere because it makes students and staff more aware of these differences and more sensitive to them. On professors, affection towards professors. Professors of color, definitely improve the racial atmosphere because they offer the student, because after the students get to know the professor and open up to them, it's usually the first person of a different race that they've had to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and they end up more accepting of people of that race by the end of the semester. Interesting research by Michael Emerson on his book Divided by Faith on different ways in which whites and non-whites understand racism. And that for whites, racism is an individual thing, a personal thing. And the solution to racism is to develop relationships, lead people to Jesus, and people become better and there's less racism. For people of color, they put in a structural component to it. Now, the reason why I bring that up is the relationship with the professor fits into that white paradigm of relationships. Now, we can critique that that approach, and I've been part of that critique, and that's fine. But where they are at is, if I get to know a professor of color, and that person becomes humanized to me, all of a sudden it changes my worldview. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Well, it was empowering to be taught by an African-American woman and had great respect and interest in her personal climb path to where she is now. I now see race definitely as a human-made construction, a cultural construction, developing ideas about differences between people to model for reality by a group. So once again, the professor, that individual touch is very important for these students. Why? More information. Now you can say, well, you got to get information those other ways too, but yet for reasons that I'm going to go into, I don't think they're as effective. The A diversity courses allow students to learn about different cultures in great detail. This helps diminish stereotypes because ultimately these stereotypes are only based on a lack of knowledge from other groups. And notice you putting whites up here right now. Because part of what happens is when the percentage of whites change, and this is not to say that students of color don't have a responsibility in this process either. As whites change, it is going to change the atmosphere of the campus. I took a trip to the South to see several civil rights museums and events which broadened my knowledge. I have seen that there's a lot more disadvantage for minorities than I was originally aware of. I've learned to be more culturally aware and sensitive. So just the plain information can change people's perspectives. As they get more information they did not have before. That too is very important as well. Okay, personal reflection. I've come to realize that although I'm not racist, I place judgment on others based off of looks, and that is the same as being racist. This is person as they reflect it in their courses or in their relationships with their professors. I was able to see how I was oblivious to the many things I take for granted in my whiteness in various situations that are important. But I learned that I'm not a racist, but someone that deals with prejudice every so often. I was one of those people who was ignorant, not racist, but just unaware of what was really going on. Now, I know that there is a debate on what it means to say someone's racist or not, and that sort of stuff. So one thing that, and this is the thing that I tell people that if you're going to communicate with people, you got to communicate where they're at. And one of the mistakes that I think a lot of people make when they try to talk about racial issues, they say, well, here's where I'm at. I expect you to be here. If you're not here, I don't have patience for you. These students say, well, I'm not a racist, but, and some people say, well, you really are. That is useless, okay? Let me just be honest. People say, well, yeah, you really are racist. Then, thanks. That's another person who's lost. These people are saying, I'm not racist, but I'm ignorant. I'm not a racist, but look what my whiteness has done for me. This is a big step for some of these students. Remember some of the earlier quotes, well, I came from a non-diverse atmosphere, that's where I wanted to be at, to, no, I'm not a racist. But yeah, people of color have had it hard. If you can't appreciate that step, then, where we're going to go from there. So these are the sort of things that begin to happen in these sort of settings. Now, let me just say why I think courses and professors matter in a way that programs, multicultural programs, and race programs don't. Why do you go to college? You go to college because you go to college to go to courses, to learn from professors, whether it's so you can get a good paying job, whether it's so you can become a more well-rounded person. I know that there's that whole dichotomy. Is college to create a better citizen, or is it to help you to make more money? Whatever. You go to college because you're going to learn courses from professors. You do not go to college to go to multicultural programs. When we deal with race in the natural course of what a college, how people see, now, I'm not saying you should not have extra programs. I'm just saying for the average person, that's not what they're thinking about when going to college. I must admit, when I'm thinking about sending my boys to college, I'm thinking about they better stay in class. I care a whole lot more that they attend class and they attend a program, no matter how great that program is. Because the purpose, the organic purpose for them to go to college is to go to class, get educated. That makes learning about racial issues more natural, more organic, less forced. I think that's a big reason why, in my responses, there's more success with diverse professors and with courses than there is when we look at these other programs. There can be purposes for these other programs, but right now the way they're constructed is not retaining and recruiting students of color. Now I want to talk about minority students for a second here. I intentionally didn't put minority students there because we got to talk about types of minority students. And this just came out, there's students that I just term assimilated minority students. For example, I don't think anything needs to be done about racial diversity. There's no problem, don't try and fix it. This is a multiracial female at a conservative school, a Hispanic at a conservative school, female. Generally, there's not a positive racial atmosphere. I attribute that to the fact that programs attempt to solve the problem, alienate those who do not agree. And this Hispanic male, if non-European culture programs just unites that certain group, other groups find it offensive. Assimilated minority students, when they respond to questions like that, sound like average white students. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is that the assumption that all minority students want the same thing is one that I think we have to be very careful of. There's minority students who are coming here, and they're coming here to get their degree and move on. And we can decide what we want to do with that. That's just reality. I have no way of knowing what percentage that is. There was enough of them who showed up that I think this is not an insignificant number. So, maybe one day someone will do research to really tease this out and say, okay, we know that 40% of them are assimilated. Now, obviously, you have students who are more racialized. I feel that the only time students of color get any spotlight is during Black History Month because the event is being offered as well as convocation and is promoted all over campus. Once this month is over, it's back to the norm. If I'm the only Black student in that class and I sometimes feel intimidated or scared to speak up, if I have a question, this is not in all classes, but some. Okay, so, the majority group does not understand the need for people of color to celebrate the culture, so therefore they become angry and want to end the program. The majority of people involved are minorities, so that means that people we want to inform are not getting informed and show support. So you do have the racialized students who are frustrated in this sort of situation. So you have assimilated and racialized students. My suspicion is that ultimately, as we try to find solutions, we have to think about solutions for both. That there is no one size that fits all for students of color, just like there isn't for white students. That there's going to be different solutions for different individuals, and I think that's how we're going to have to start thinking about it. And so, that's one of the things that I wasn't looking for in my findings, but as I ran across assimilated minority students, I realized, okay, you got a decent number on the minority students that says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We don't need to do anything. Just leave me alone and let me study for my classes. All right. And now, another thing that I found was that student-led diversity organizations matter, especially for retention. And I think when you go back to Tino and the integration into the educational atmosphere, that this becomes very important, especially when they're multicultural. So it was more important that they're multicultural and not catering to just a single racial group, and also voluntary. Some of the students talking about that, it gives you the opportunity to learn from others and gives them the chance to talk about their own culture. The Student Committee on Diversity has improved the atmosphere. I'm beginning to see a lot of white students wanting to bring a change to campus and want to learn more about other cultures than the white culture. And it improves because it can help students who have different cultures to know more about each other and become friends. One of the things that came out when students were talking about them was, these organizations, we get a chance to talk. We get a chance to interact. And we're learning from each other. And that's changing the atmosphere. And I suspect that this is, when you're a student of color and you get a chance to connect in these multicultural institutions, you feel more integrated into the system. And now you feel like you belong. And maybe you can feel like you can even change things. And that's going to help retain you so that you can possibly graduate. One of the things that I'm not 100% sure is coming up, one of the things that my finding was that diversity courses and minority professors also tend to create an atmosphere of conversation. The conversation was very important. And there's some other research that shows that professors of color tend to encourage conversation more than white professors in their classes. And so, that is, I'm more and more convinced that that is an important component to what works and why it works and doesn't work. And so, when we're thinking about why things don't work and why things do work, maybe some things that don't work could work if we use some of the principles. And this may be a principle we have to consider. Okay. Successful professors and courses provoke awareness about racism. A class has opened up my eyes to the struggles that blacks and other minorities face and has initiated many conversations both in and out of the classroom, what I was talking about, changed my view about race relations in the U.S. I recognize I have a life of underprivilege that minorities have not been offered. The classes, my professor of colors give me a sense of race diversity, and this allows me to understand others more. It's made me more aware of what I say and do. Generally, professors of color are excellent communicators and knowledgeable concerning racial issues. Therefore, they can educate my peers concerning what minorities go through. So we can see in this case, a minority as for the whites, on how this awareness comes out in these sort of programs. And you've been reading a lot from students, so I'll rush through these. But appreciation of other cultures. Makes these people even more real when you see them face to face. First, from North Korea, a professor from Brazil. These teachers help me appreciate other cultures, help me understand how Americans can be set in their thinking and challenge to broaden my horizons, said by a conservative Asian student. So it's not just white students who can learn from this, it's also students of color who can learn. Asian student learns from a professor from Brazil. Okay, and this is the thing I was talking about, promoting discussions. That was an important aspect that I found. That improves the racial atmosphere because we had discussions and we talked about what we're seeing on campus and throughout our lives, bring up tough topics to discuss in the class. When I was at UNT, I used to teach courses in sociology, religion, and race ethnicity. And they say the three things you don't talk about at the dinner table is race, politics, and religion. So I had two out of the three. Learn how to talk tough topics in those two classes was a challenge, but it's something that I think produced a lot of dividends. Change can't start until people start talking. These classes force students to talk about racial issues. So I do think that a communication component is something that we have to start thinking about in our programs. Okay, are there any drawbacks? Yes, there are some students that this didn't work. Why? Well, sometimes the professor just wasn't liked by the students. This is, it may not because there are white professors not liked by the students either. Okay, so it's not necessarily a racial thing, but the students do not like the professor, then all of a sudden all that, okay, they'll connect and they're going to learn, tends to go by the wayside. Unfortunately, it puts a little bit more pressure on professors of color than it does on white professors. If the white professor not like, okay, you just move on. Professor of color not like, okay, race relations is bunk. No pressure. Hostility from professors. I had students who talked about how professors were hostile towards them, and that turned them off. So you just have to think about those sort of things. Connections, relationships was important. Hostility. This is what the students say. And perceived lack of incompetence in the course or of the professor. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is that there is research that shows that students are less likely to think you're competent if you're a professor of color. So, and it's kind of funny. I remember a few years ago that some of us were sitting around talking about some of our bad evaluations from students, some of our professors. And what's interesting is there's me and another professor who's an African American. And all the professors were talking about bad evaluations. So it wasn't that, we're the only ones who got bad evaluations. But we're the only ones who got evaluations that we were incompetent. They got bad evaluations for other things, being mean or biased or like that. But when it's, we were talking about, hey, I had students say, well, he's incompetent, and she had students say that, but none of the other white professors had that. So that's not research, but there is research that shows professors of color are less likely to be seen as competent than other professors. And so, when that occurs, that is going to be problematic as well. So, what does this all come down to? All right, so if once again, I wouldn't mind making money. If you want to hire me to evaluate your college, I'll do that. But you can get this for free. I suggest if what you're looking for is retention and recruitment, less emphasis on institutional diversity programs. I know. I'm just going where the data takes me. And that gets me in trouble, but okay. But they're not correlated with that. We've seen qualitative work showing, that they can actually create a little bit of friction, some resentment. Students pick up on this. There may be reasons to have it beyond that, but as far as retaining students, as far as recruiting students, I don't see the data showing that they're that effective. Diversity in the curriculum. One thing colleges can do, if they don't already do that, is to require a diversity course. One thing they can do is to have diversity courses in the curriculum. Why not add a Black History course or a sociology, race, ethnicity course or things of this nature? You can add these. You could add a Hispanic Studies program, and you could add diversity in the curriculum, and in adding diversity in the curriculum, you will create those diversity courses. Faculty is important, and while I focus in on faculty of color, white faculty is important too. That some students talked about how they're sometimes it was a white professor teaching this diversity course, or a white professor discourages them from looking at racial issues as well. Remember, why students come to college? They come to college to, believe it or not, to sit under people like me and be taught by us. So what the professor says is going to matter. Now, when can you do that in a college setting where there's academic freedom and that sort of stuff? I mean, those are some questions you have to ask yourself. But we can't get away from how important that is. Preparing faculty to deal with diversity issues, I think is very important. Some professors have not had to deal with diversity very much either. So it's not just the students who have it. Sometimes there's professors who have it as well. So how do you prepare professors to engage in that? What sort of training? I mean, these are questions we have to ask. What sort of training is helpful in doing that? Maybe that's my next research project, who knows? There was some resistance, I picked it from some students, like I said, from some of the non-diversity professors who, especially on some of the college campuses, why are we doing this? And so, once again, that's why preparing for faculty is very important. Getting them to buy in to it is vital. And encouraging student-led diversity groups. Obviously, there has to be student-led. You can't set them up yourself. But this is going to be very important for retention. Encouraging those sort of groups is going to be important according to this work. And so those, what I would suggest, you can get that for free, or you can buy my book. I don't care. But anyways, that's some of what our research says, and I guess I'll just take some questions if people have them. Yeah.
That sought to address the history of racism, establish diversity and multicultural programs, and the anecdotal effect was that minority faculty left those campuses because they wanted to be teachers, and they got over-tapped into this. And so all the examples you gave of faculty-student interactions were in the classroom.
Yeah.
What do minority faculty say? Do you have any information on retention of minority faculty as diversity programming goes up?
Yeah, that's not what I studied, so I didn't study that directly. There is research out there looking at retention of minority faculty and some of the ideas on how to do that, what to do. And one of the issues that does come up is, you get you're a minority faculty, and all of a sudden people want minority representation on all these committees, and so all of a sudden you're on everything. Or you're quickly moved into administration, and so you're really not dealing with students and things of this nature. And so So yeah, I can't really say from my research, here's what I would suggest. I would say based on other research I've read that trying to groom minority faculty so that they can succeed is going to be very important. And I know that some colleges have done programs in order to recruit minority faculty, such as paying for the education for someone, assuming that once they get their doctorate, that they're going to come work for you. And so I don't know how successful that is, to be honest, since that wasn't my focus. But obviously, with what I'm suggesting, this opens up that we really need to look at how can we really retain minority faculty? How can we bring them in? How can we retain them? I think that's, and let's just be honest, the pipeline is that, minorities go in lower numbers as you get higher and higher and higher. So when you're in competition, so if you have minority faculty who's qualified, you're in competition for that person. It goes from, in a sense, let's just be honest, it goes from a sense, before you're in college and you're just, some minority person on the street and people are locking their car doors to drive by you, you're just, but once you actually become a professor and have some success, people actually want you. And so, that is going to be a factor too when you're trying to retain. I mean, if you got someone who's good, you got to do what you can to keep that person, because there's going to be other places that are going to have the same idea in mind, want to hire that person. And so all those are factors you just have to consider. Yeah.
So I had a question about the diversity courses, which you found were also helpful. Do you have data on whether it matters whether those courses are required, like rather either a specific course or say taking a distribution, you must take a course like this?
Yeah.
Because in my extremely anecdotal observation, students self-select into courses
Right.
that people like them.
Yeah. I think that is a factor that I have to consider when I look at my data, that students who take diversity courses want to be on diversity courses. But we also know that there are places that require diversity courses as well. I couldn't tease that out per se on whether or not, but one thing to consider is, and this is why I still think diversity courses matter, is that you can say the same thing about, say, multicultural programs. That people only go to them because they want to, and yet they're not that effective. And so that's why I think that the diverse courses do matter. It is a valid question. If we start requiring them, will they be less effective? I can't say that they will. I think they won't, simply because you're required to take math. You're required to take sciences. I mean, we require students to take stuff that, how many students think, well, why am I learning trigonometry? I'm never going to use this. So we require students to do that anyways. I think diverse courses could be part of that, which means that it's just another one, but it's not this sort of, it'd be one thing if like you had a trade dentist program, you have all these dental work, and then you have, the dentistry of black teeth. I mean, people are going, what? But in the course of a liberal arts program, I think it's a lot more acceptable. So I can't guarantee that it won't matter, but I think it's going to matter less because of that sort of mentality.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in the fact that it's like these organic, student-led, non-institutional programs that have this, incredible potential for retention and recruitment. Also, I would say, for the individual benefits that the students are gaining from those relationships. What was missing for me was, and in particular on these campuses, was the role of student life and particularly residential life. So we know from the contact hypothesis and the work in that area that you've written extensively about that positive cross-racial contact among people on an equal peer, so not professor to student, but student to student, really has a profound impact on how students see the other and define those individuals. Which makes me worry about places like Baylor that rely on a Match.com placement service to pair roommates up. Because in the selection process of finding someone like me, race and ethnicity becomes codes that cause people to self-select. And I know of only a few universities that say, we won't allow you to select a roommate because it's so important for us that you get that exposure to diversity. These were residential campuses in your study, and do you have any comment on the role?
I'm not sure they all were, but yeah, but they mostly. Yeah, I mean, All right, a couple things about contact. Contact matters, but the type of contact matters. And so part of what happens is some of the contact was actually detrimental. But you're right. I mean, I do think that, generally speaking, having, come what may, at least as freshmen, I mean, I guess I can understand, like, if you're a junior and you've developed a friendship with someone and you want to room with them, that makes a little bit more sense. But, it seems to me that, when students first come in, that having them, that, yeah, I mean, the research is out there that people are going to use race as a marker as to who they're going to room with. And thus, you're going to reinforce the racial cliques that we have in our society. And so yeah, I didn't look at it. I did check on whether or not the school had a diversity office or not, and I found that was correlated a little bit with a recruitment. I don't think it was retention with recruitment. It wasn't as strong as the other one, so I didn't talk that much about it. And really, it was hard for me to get at why, simply because the students don't talk about it. Students will talk about classes, they'll talk about, these programs they went to or history month, but they don't talk about the diversity office. They may talk about what the diversity office has done, but they don't talk about it itself. And so I wasn't comfortable saying, okay, there's this diversity office and it really matters because of this, this, and this. I tend to think that it may matter because it just shows a commitment of the university to these issues. It may actually, and I'm not saying this for certain, it may actually be nothing that they do. It's just that the university is committed, they got a diversity office, and that's going to, matter. But yeah, I didn't get into housing because the data doesn't allow me to do that. But I think you're dead on as far as talking about, that is a way in which we could get some of the integration that could be organic that happens. And I didn't know about Match.com and.
That's not what they call it, right?
Yeah.
It is the roommate pairing equivalent.
Okay. All right. They didn't have that when I was going to college, so. Yeah.
Dr. Yancey, were there significant differences in student opinions or minority educational outcomes between the mainline and conservative colleges broadly?
There wasn't as big a difference as I thought there was going to be. The mainline and the conservative colleges students, basically, I had fewer mainline students than conservative students, and so a lot of my examples tend to come from more conservative students. There may have been, the only thing I can remember, because I was thinking about that myself, and the only thing I can remember a little bit was some of the quotations that were more racially tinged tend to come from the conservative students a little bit more. Other than that, though, I think that the findings were about the same on each campus. Yeah. Yeah.
In your research on the courses, what you call the diversity courses, did you find, or did you even test whether it mattered if the professor identified with the tradition being taught? For instance, was it necessary to have an African-American professor teaching African-American history for that course to be successful in what you were looking at?
Yeah, I didn't test for that, but what I did see was it matters if the professor is of color in general, and it matters if there's a course. Now, I didn't test to see if there's an interactive effect of having a professor of color teaching a diversity course. So I didn't test for that. My speculation is that would probably make it more effective, but who knows? You don't know until you actually are able to test for something like that. One thing I did do in order to understand why courses matter beyond some of the things that I looked at as far as awareness was, at the time in which I was writing this book, I was teaching 2 online courses at UNT. And one course was the multiracial family. The other course was race and Christianity. And so I was sort of curious, okay, what are students learning from these courses? Why is it that the diverse courses may matter? And so I actually gave them extra credit if they would write out, 2 or 3 things that they really learned from the course. And the main difference was, when I taught multiracial family, is about multiracial families, about relationships, interpersonal relationships, biracial kids, that sort of stuff. The race and Christianity course dealt with structural racism. And one thing I picked up was that when students are exposed to issues of structural racism, that appears to have a significantly different effect on what they learn. It's not in the other course they didn't learn about racial issues and tolerance and stuff like that, but they tend to become more aware of how institutions impact people of color. And so one of the things that I do suggest in diverse courses, if possible, is to introduce some sort of institutional element to those courses. And I think, whether white or non-white, I think that would also change, make the course one in which students would learn more from them. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your talk. So my question is about sort of the final suggestions
Mm-hmm.
at the end. So I guess I was thinking that all those things you were mentioning, those could be really helpful in any sort of institution,
Yeah.
secular or Christian. I know your data was coming from Protestant colleges and universities.
Yes.
So I guess my question was, in the implementation of those suggestions, whether it's the diversity
Yeah.
courses, classes of color, is there anything distinctive about the way a Christian institution would implement
Right.
that? rather than-
Very good question. And I thought about that too. I also kicked myself because I realized, if I'd done this for like elite schools, then I could have had them pay me to go and advise them. Christian schools will give you $5,000. They'll give you like $100,000. We'll get a donor or whatever. All right. So everything I couch is because I didn't study those schools. I can't say, all right, we know this. All right. So just understand that I have to frame it that way. I suspect that yes, diversity courses would matter more. I suspect, once again, that the institutional diversity programs would matter less. The one area where I think there may be some distinctiveness, and I think this is because, I'm basing it on Emerson and Smith's work, is, how important relationships are in Christian college campuses as opposed to secular schools, especially once you get away from, say, liberal arts schools, if you go to the big state school. I don't know if that finding would be replicated as easily, that the relationship with the professor matters as much. Having taught at a decently large state school, the relationships with, it's not that you don't develop relationships with undergraduate students, but, when you have a class of 100 students, you're only going to develop so many relationships. And in a sense, that's not your job. Your job is to teach and then go do research. I think at Christian college, especially since we know that Christians are more into relationships as a solution than non-Christians are, which has its advantages and disadvantages, but it is just the reality. I think that finding, I don't know if that would be replicated on a non-Christian campus. I'm less confident that it would be. Maybe it would. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm less confident. I tend to think that the other ones would, but once again, having not studied those campuses, then it's just speculation at this point. Yeah.
Dr. Yancey, given the dual history of Christianity, its co-optation by slaveholders to perpetuate that system, and even recent history, some of your data pointed out that some students just don't think that the discussion of diversity is important enough.
Mm-hmm.
Given what's going on every college campus and across society, how is it not important? What can be done, or what should be done, so that people that think it's just no big deal to make it relevant when everywhere else is clearly having an impact?
Yeah. I think the best way to try to reach students who blow off the importance of this is through, at least on Christian college campuses, through relationships, through the sort of diversity courses that will happen. And, I think a key is just, communication. Communication with, the students who tend to change their perspectives was, I talked to someone and it changed my mind and I began to see things I didn't see before. And if you think about it this way, if you grow up, in an atmosphere that's, 95% white, and your friends tend to be white, and you're taught, we're all equal, and we're not talking about your father's grand wizard, the Ku Klux Klan, you're taught, and then you go to a situation which is school, which is 90% white. It's easy to see how someone in that sort of situation thinks, well, what's the big deal? I get along with everyone. I have a few people of color friends. I get along with everyone. They've not encountered the reality. And just telling them that from the news or from something like that is probably not going to be enough. but having someone relate to them that they see appears to have an effect. And so one of the things I've pushed, whether on Christian college campus or not, is we're not going to make any progress on race relations until we really have real conversations with one another, where we both listen and talk. And and the lack of those conversations, I think, is been to our detriment in our society. So that's what my answer is. How can people not see what's happening and be blind? I try to say, all right, why are they blind, and how can we lead them out? I think that sort of awareness is how we would have to lead them out. Yeah.
My question is somewhat related to the one Sarah asked. It's a question born out of the title of your session, neither Jew nor Gentile.
Yeah.
That may have just been a provocative way of framing the session, but I didn't know if you had, in fact, some exegetical point or position in mind drawing.
It's a cute title for my book.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
So is there?
Yeah, I don't have any theological, I've been taught, neither Jew nor Gentile is about race although I know that it's not true because I know it, never mind. It was a cute title for my book.
Okay.
That's yeah, I don't have anything deeper than that, sorry. Yeah.
Do you, have you gotten any sense, either empirically or anecdotally, that your findings are on the table when these institutions are doing strategic planning around diversity?
Nope. I haven't got any sense that that's happened. I hope that, one of the reasons, honestly, one of the reasons why I wrote the book was I wanted, that's why it was important to me what worked, and that I wasn't getting, all right, I want this to work, so I'm going to make it. I didn't want to go in there making an argument for this. I want to say, all right, this is what works. Whether people are really reading it and implementing it, I know there are a couple situations, but yeah, I haven't got a sense that this is all the rage or anything like that. Be nice, but it's,
I've recommended it to multiple chief diversity officers.
all right, rock and roll. My man.
Well, I didn't necessarily mean it just for diversity officers. I meant like a lot of these places have diversity plans at an institutional level in which everybody, at least on theory, is supposed to buy in. And this strikes me as the kind of data that would have a shaping effect on the kinds of strategic decisions that an institution may want to make, especially when it involves spending money. So that's why I asked.
Yeah. I wrote the book because my target audience was administrators on Christian college campuses. That really is my target audience. And it's an academic book, but I try to write it in a readable way and try to lay it out. And so, I would like to see more. I'd like to know whether or not my ideas really work or not, and see more people test them out. Yeah.
Just to clarify, when you say diversity curricula, you mean 4 credit classes taught in an academic department, not a day-long teach-in about
Right.
race?
Right. Yeah. I'm talking about academic classes. Yes. Because really, when you think about it, a day-long teaching would create the same problems that I foresee on a multicultural program. It's this artificial thing that's there. Whereas the course is, hey, you got to sign up for your history course, and you got to sign up for your ethnic studies course. That's what you do. Yeah.
If the college required diversity courses, was there any indication of which subject was best, like history or sociology of race, or was it all equal?
Of course, always sociology. No, No, I didn't have data to really refine it that way, or that would have been, I would have had a much bigger sample before I could start saying types of courses. But there probably is something to that. There probably are certain courses that are better for it than others. Yeah.
In my field in psychology, our big organization, our APA, has put forth guidelines actually some years ago suggesting that we move away from courses focused on diversity and instead have goals within each of the classes
Yeah.
that are aimed at diversity. Do you have any sense of
That I think I didn't test that, but my sense is that would work just as well because it's still within the natural course of what college is. My only, now you're a psychology, so it wouldn't matter. My only thinking is that, I can see how students may take a series of courses that there's just no, I mean, if you're a math student and all you're taking is math courses, obviously, yeah. So that's where our diversity requirement would be helpful, because now you have to at least stop and take that one course. But, I don't have any, that's a quibble, but yeah, I think that'd be fine, yeah. Okay. Oh.
This is a little bit like your question, so for example, a black student union, is that a student-led organization? Or is that the designation you made between, there's a difference apparently between, I'm blanking on the words that you use.
Yeah,
'cause
multicultural.
They were sort of similar, but.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the students seem to talk more about organizations that were not focused on a single race, even if there's a minority race. That those that were diversity or multicultural, that those tend to be what they want, and that they were voluntary. In other words, they were student-led, that they weren't set up by the administration. That seems to be a value. And maybe it's because it is also organic, because even though it's not your purpose, when a lot of students go to school, they do join organizations that they've created. Yeah.
Any last questions? Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, because this is really more my own work, did your survey at all ask where the students' parents were born or where they were born? Because I just wonder if someone whose parents are from Africa or someone whose parents were from Peru or something might have a different understanding of diversity than someone who's a
Yeah.
third or fourth or fifth or more generation American.
Yeah.
Still minority.
Yeah, I didn't ask that. I don't know if I had a lot of international students anyways. I mean, I could pick up a couple from the answers that they are probably international students, but I think most of my students of color, first you saw my numbers of students of color was lower than the overall, and then you have to go into, I assume you're talking about coming from countries of color.
Yeah, I can tell you at elite schools, a very high percentage of non-white students are first or second
Yeah.
generation immigrants.
Right,
And something around 50% of African-American students at the Ivy
Yeah.
Leagues have a parent who wasn't born in the United States,
Yeah.
or they're West Indian or
Yeah.
they're African, and that comes up often in these discussions around diversity, and that
Yeah.
may be particular to a certain subset of
Yeah.
schools, but sometimes it's extremely relevant, whether you're
Oh, yeah, it's definitely
from
relevant.
the US or
Yeah.
an immigrant.
Yeah, it's definitely relevant. I mean, as you know, that diversity means something very different from an African to an African American. It's a very different meaning. And I'm sure some of them were first, second generation, because Christian schools do tend to attract certain numbers of students who come from other countries. I just don't know if I would have the sufficient numbers to really tease anything out. And I didn't ask the question, so I couldn't anyways.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Yancey.